So before we dive into culture, I think the agenda for today, and I'm pretty excited about this talk. But so we'll talk about the data behind recognition-driven culture, and like Becca said, one of the first thing is really we want to talk about what is culture and why recognition is a critical piece around that. And then afterwards, we'll kind of talk about the data about recognition frequency and why quality matters, not just frequency, and then why participating in that recognition-driven kind of culture is important as well, and a bit more information for question and how to apply this to your organization. And I might stop in between to answer questions or anything that might be unclear or you want answers to. So I'm happy. So Becca, feel free to stop me if the chat is going crazy. Okay, so I can just answer any question people might have, because sometimes I go too quickly, so that's okay. So diving to culture, what is culture? So there's that boring definition of what culture is, which is the shared basic assumption, values, and beliefs that characterize an organization. But culture is really is what is taught to newcomers when they come in. It's the DNA of your organization. It really represents, the vibe of your whole organization. And it's tricky because it's something that happens over the long term. It's kind of not, it's kind of obvious what it is, but it's hard to measure, it's hard to capture. Because there's so many people, sometimes organizations, so many things happening that people will forge your culture. And yeah, so it can be tricky where it goes. So that's why it's really important to be clear on what culture you want to build as an organization and tie it to your organizational values. Because if you have clear, specific, and you communicate your organizational values to your employees, then you're more likely to build a culture that you're looking for. And if you don't manage that, if you don't set those clear expectations, if you don't communicate that well, culture will become whatever the people want it to be, right? And there's going to be a bunch of different teams, different departments, and things like that. So it can become really messy quickly if not managed. So culture is a big thing. And using recognition to build culture is also really an effective way to have like amazing results. So I'll
I
hand it
was
back to you,
muted.
Becca. Yeah.
I was muted. I'm so sorry. Um, my next question here. I know sometimes we use the term climate to talk about aspects of culture. And so could you give a description for that as well and how it compares or differentiates from culture?
Yeah, before I answer that, what the chat thinks about it? What's the difference between culture and climate? Like one word or two. Do we have like any ideas or things?
I know folks are thinking it's a tough one.
Yeah, it's a tough question. You could see climate as employee experience, instead of culture. I don't see the
Oh,
chat
there you
here.
go.
See,
Got some answers here, Yannick.
attitude, climate change quickly. Exactly, varies. Exactly. So good job, everyone. So the way it is culture of a climate. Climate is not really a term that's used that much uh, in practice, but you could see it more as employee experience. So it's kind of what happens day to day and things like that. But climate will influence your culture over time. And climate can be controlled, can be measured, and there's a lot of things you can do around that to influence your culture over time, right? So it's more fluid and changeable. And you don't want to neglect it either because it's going to impact your culture over time. And so yeah, so that would be, the basic difference without going into too much details around that.
I love it. Like people in the comments are expanding on this as well, like saying, culture is more steady and long term.
Yep,
Climate can change based on the issues and emotions that are coming up, or depend based on how it feels, sway based on the day.
exactly. Yeah, you
Love
can have,
it.
that's a good one as well. You can be in a difficult economic climate for your industry, but company culture can still be positive. Exactly, right? So you're always going to have some challenging times, some good times, but if you have a good culture, if you make an effort to consistently, build it, then that can stay positive in the long term. And that's what you want to do. And recognition can be used, to build culture. And that's what we're going to talk about today and the impact it has.
Amazing. And we know that most cultures do measure their culture through engagement surveys or stats like turnover, retention, et cetera, et cetera. And so, from a data perspective, Yannick, what signals actually tell us whether culture is improving or deteriorating?
Yeah. So great question, Becca. I would say understanding those two components, and I think, most people here know what they are, but it's leading indicators and lagging indicators that you want to kind of focus on. So your leading indicators, these are your inputs, these are your drivers. What drives kind of your employee experience and in the long-term culture. These are things that, will precede outcomes. And outcomes are things like, satisfaction, people leaving, turnover, people think about quitting, engagement, people burnout, stress, absenteeism, which is like not showing up to work, presenteeism, which is showing up to work but not, giving your all. And any like exit interview data that you get, this is all data you can collect to kind of figure out, what are the reactive metric? How is kind of your culture doing? Is it kind of positive, negative, or is turnover high? Is burnout high? Is stress high? And then you can kind of use the leading indicators to help you understand what actually predict these things. And there's many things that predict these things. And I have a few examples here. You kind of have psychological safety, which is being able to be yourself at work. It wasn't them feeling that you belong at work. Recognition, I put it in yellow here because that's the one we'll be focusing on today. But also the belief in organizational values. If you have employees that believe in the values of your organization, then it's more likely that they're going to follow and help you build the culture you want. The effectiveness of your manager, do they support, the employees? Are they clear in what has to be done? Peer relationship, do you have friends at work? These are also important things. Mentorship, do you have people that can actually like teach you things or you can grow in the organization? So there's a lot of things around that.
Amazing. Now, I think you had another point here that you wanted to share about the recognition as a leading indicator.
Yeah, so recognition here would be our leading indicators. So if you follow the slide,
Okay.
uh, recognition will provide kind of, and that's, what I want to talk about. We'll show data around that. So we did a case study, with 1,263 employees that kind of shows that, different recognition patterns predict engagement, satisfaction, and turnover intention, or the likelihood of employees staying in organization. And you can actually measure that, right? So you can use recognition as a leading indicator and you can observe the behavior. So are people recognizing in your company that's measurable in real time? And what's the frequency of recognition that happens, and what's the quality? If you can figure that out, then that will lead to positive internal outcomes, right? Better engagement, greater satisfaction, lower turnover intentions, and things like that. And that will lead over time, if you consistently use recognition to build that up, that can lead to cultural change, right? So better business results, so higher retention numbers, higher performance, higher revenue, better productivity. So it's kind of using recognition as that leading indicators that will help you improve internal components or outcomes. And over time, if you consistently do that, or ensure that people in your organization like recognize regularly and with good quality, then you will improve your internal outcomes, and it's going to slowly go towards building a positive and healthy recognition culture,
No, that's
which
awesome.
there's great data that we're going to show about that soon.
Yeah, I was gonna say,
Uh, if I
yeah,
can
we
dive into
can,
that.
yeah, for sure. Because we know that there is a lot of advice and like talk around recognizing people more, but then there's also like the balance or the question around like, can we be overdo, like, are we overdoing it? And so, what does the data actually show when it comes to recognition frequency?
Yeah, so I have a kind of a case study here that I'm going to kind of explain and go through. But we did kind of, did a survey with some of our customer base where we surveyed 1,263 employees across 28 companies in 3 different global industries. And we measured some specific survey dimensions. So the leading indicators that we looked at was, first of all, the recognition frequency. So how often people are recognized by their leaders and how often people are recognized by their peers. Then platform usage. So here at Bucketlist, we have a recognition platform, so that's kind of building a recognition program. So we look at people who engage or log in a lot in the like on the recognition platform. So people who use the platform monthly versus people who don't use it as much, how does that impact different outcomes? And then recognition quality. Is the recognition that you're getting of good quality or bad quality? And then what's the impact of that on work engagement, on job satisfaction, and turnover intention? Or as I'm going to explain today, likelihood to stay. So today, I'm going to dive into that data more specifically. And the first step is recognition frequency. But I think before we dive into that, is there like any question in the chat or thing that people like to share around, what I've been discussing so far?
Not yet, but I'm sure they will come.
Well, yeah, let's wait a couple seconds here. Yeah, that's a really good question. And yeah, so what's a good frequency to access recognition? I would say um, the optimal range is monthly or more, right? You would want ideally more than once a month, but like a few times a month, and more than that is kind of the threshold you want to achieve across your whole organization. If everyone can get recognized or use the platform or get recognized, monthly or more, you'll really start seeing a big impact, which we'll kind of see in the result. And yes, I'll send the slides afterwards, right? So no need to take notes and stuff. We'll send the slide to all of you afterwards. Yeah, so the first step is frequency. So if you can recognize people, or people can get recognized in your organization monthly or more, of course, weekly is good, daily is good, but the threshold you want to achieve is monthly or more, or multiple times a month. And the first thing that we looked at, like I said, is leader recognition. So how often you get recognized by your leader or manager. Second one is peer recognition. How often you get recognized by your lead, here should be by your peer. My bad. And finally, the recognition program, or do you have a recognition program in place, or is there a structure? So here, as an example, I'm going to use like using Bucketlist because it's a structured approach to actually recognize people, see recognition, and things like that. So we look into that. Like, let's dive into number because I think they are pretty amazing. So the first step is the impact of leader recognition. So what I did here, and that goes really well with the question that would ask about what's the ideal, number to get recognized. So we kind of separate people in different groups. So we look at people who got recognized, yearly or less, multiple times, or let's say like a few times a year or less, and people who got recognized monthly or more. So we separate these people into two groups, and then we look at what's the impact on engagement, on satisfaction, and the likelihood to stay in the organization. So out of the people who get rarely recognized, so yearly or less, 57% of them, were engaged or reported to be engaged. And if you compare them to the group that are frequently getting recognized, so monthly or more, that number jumps to 72%. So that's a 15-point increase. And the kind of same pattern you're seeing with satisfaction, it goes from 63% to 82%. And then for the likelihood to stay, it jumps from 67 to 76%. And if you look at what's the impact, let's say for a 500 people company, that means that you have 75 more employees that are engaged in your company. 95 of them are more satisfied, and there's 45 of them that are less likely to leave or think about quitting. So which is kind of a great impact. And out of the people typically that think about leaving, there's about like 10% to 20%, depending on the organization that would leave, right? So if there's 45 people, fewer people that are planning to leave, that would make about like four to eight, I would say, like people or employees that would remain in the organization instead of leaving simply because they got recognized monthly instead of never being recognized, which is a pretty amazing way, which is not really costly or anything to improve those metrics. And then if we dive in peer recognition, the same kind of pattern emerged. So for engagement, it jumped from 55 to 71, 64 to 79% for satisfaction, and 70 to 75 for likely to stay in the organization. So recognizing more, improve all of these things. And that's going to reflect on your ROI at the end of the day. That's going to reflect on performance. That's going to reflect on productivity and so on. Because employees were more engaged, more satisfied, and, and employees that are in your organization that not leave will yield better result, obviously. And then the next things that we looked at as well was the platform usage. So we look at people who use the platform monthly or more versus people who use it yearly or less. And once again, these numbers are quite amazing. People who don't use the platform as much, who don't participate, let's say, in the recognition program, so they just, their engagement. So 54% of these individuals reported that they were not engaged, whereas 70% of them reported that they were engaged. So that's a 16-point increase, and you have a 28-point increase for satisfaction and a 22-point increase for likelihood to stay. So for a 500-person company, that's 110 employees, fewer of them that are thinking about leaving, which is kind of massive. So yeah, any questions or
Yeah, there
thoughts
was a
on?
question. There was a
Oh,
question in the chat actually, Yana, from Claudia. So what, because recognition obviously is so important, but what can you do as a business if employees prefer different types of recognition? How do you kind of account for that?
yeah, that's a really, really good question. And what you want to know too is you want to kind of it's important to talk to your employees, right? So often uh you're going to be working with a specific team or you're going to have a specific leader and being able to kind of you can just ask, do your employees have a specific preference about getting recognized? Do they like more private? Do they like more visible? Do they like more uh, public recognition and things like that? What type of things did you want? Like, you prefer a note or a different message or things? So I would say communication would be the number one kind of thing here. Ask your employees, and often most of the recognition also happens within your teams and things like that. So I understand it can be harder for cross department recognition, but the first step would really be asking, I would say, and that will have a good impact because giving recognition that's personal is really important.
And Claudia, I would love to hear if you want to expand on what you mean by different types. Like, is it public versus private? Is it like
Yeah.
service awards versus milestone awards or whatnot? So yeah, feel free to drop it in the chat what you mean by the different types. And I feel like other people in the community here could probably also share different ideas of things that they've done and see work really well. So would love to yeah, get that conversation going for you as well. Yannick, Lindsay mentioned that it's like a pretty significant difference as well between all these different stats. Do you have any comments about that?
Yeah, it is. And I mean, it's hard. Let's say you work really hard. So these numbers are kind of, imagine that you never see recognition in your workplace. You never get recognized for the work that you do. That's it's hard. You work really hard. You're passionate. You spend most of your time at work. So you're doing good stuff. It's 100% sure that you're doing stuff are that there's a need to be like recognized for. So if that never happens, it's really hard on the morale and things like that. So these numbers, they're backed by research and all those things because when you get recognized, it brings you closer to the culture. It also brings you closer to your team. You feel like you're valued. You feel like you belong. Otherwise, if you do all that work and no one recognizes you, you're even questioning yourself, like why is that kind of thing. So that's kind of why you see these things, and these can be pretty draining um, if you never get recognized.
Thank you, Yannick. And
Yeah,
Claudia responded back and saying, trying to communicate with managers about giving recognition to teams versus in a wide company email. Yeah,
yeah,
Claudia,
that's a
that's
good one.
definitely yeah,
Yep.
very meaningful.
And the more specific and personalized you can be, the better as well, right? So if you can recognize individuals for their unique contribution and tell them exactly what they did, that's going to maximize as well the impact of the recognition.
Yeah. And it feels more like a conversation where someone can, like a two-way thing where people can respond to it as well. With like a mass email, sometimes it's hard to be able to like talk more about it too. So yeah, depending on the person's preference and how they feel like it's more meaningful, that's definitely a great way to go. All right, Yannick, sorry, you were about to say something with the
Can I
slides
add
before I
something
cut you off.
as well?
Yeah.
Yeah, I just lost it. My bad. I'm sorry. It might come back. It wasn't that important, but yeah, it just left my brain.
They'll come back. Sorry, yes, go ahead, Yannick.
Right, yeah, we can move on in terms of like yeah, so frequency. We've talked about frequency at this moment, right? But frequency is important, but there's more to it, right? Like I said before, the quality is also important. So if recognition is frequent, right? But there's no quality to it. It's just like, let's say someone every morning tells you, thank you for being here. Thank you for being here. Thank you for being here. I mean, yeah, it might feel good a few times at the beginning, but if you don't know why and it's just a thank you here and there, it's going to lose its impact over time as well. But you need that quality as well. Like you need that specificity, that quality, that sincerity to actually maximize the power. So frequency is the first step. But then once you have frequency, you want to maximize potential recognition using meaningful, recognition and things like that. So which bring us to kind of the next part, which is the recognition quality. And I think like if you people mention what makes good quality or good recognition in the beginning, a lot of people said, personalized, sincere, and things like that. And you were pretty on the mark for these kind of things. And here at Bucketlist, we kind of like we look a lot of the data around what makes good recognition. And it kind of falls in four different categories. There might be, some different categories in here and there, but like they can mostly be tied to these. So the first one is recognition that feels authentic. So it feels genuine, it feels sincere. It's not performative in any way. And employees typically can tell the difference, when it's kind of a more fake recognition or like a recognition that's really, sincere or genuine. The second component is fair recognition. So you want the recognition to be distributed equitably and equally in your organization. Let's say someone, and a good way to see that is, let's say someone does a specific behavior and it gets recognized for it. If someone else does the exact same thing, will they get recognized as well? Let's say they work in a different teams or things like that. So these are things that but that one is a hard one to get because there's so many different roles and jobs and teams and things like that. So the fairness can be difficult, but that's why it's important to like tie it to organizational value and be clear in your company what gets recognized, and then ensures that your leaders and employees recognize, similarly across the board. So like the fairness is perceived similarly across the whole company. The third one is timely recognition. So it happens close to the moment that you get recognized. So imagine that you work really hard to finish a specific task that you had to do. You work overtime, and you don't get recognized for it. And then 5 months later, you get someone recognize you for it. Yes, it's going to feel good at that moment. But during those 5 months before you got that recognition for the work that you did, you're probably going to experience negative emotions or feel, why didn't I get that recognition when I worked so hard for it, or things like that. So, so that's going to kind of impact the morale of the person as well. So you want to make sure that you don't delay the recognition for too long. Like I would say the threshold would be like, don't go over 1 week. Otherwise, employees or people, you'll feel, okay, yeah, I mean, the work that I did was definitely not valued because it didn't happen quick enough. And then the final one, which a lot of people said as well, was personalized, right? So it matches how you like to be recognized. And that, of course, is really around, you have to ask. Like that was a good question. Like ask what your employees are looking for as well, what type of recognition they like, what they don't like as much. Some people don't mind, right? Some people is like, yeah, as long as it's similar to everyone, I'm happy with it. Do we have other questions in the chats around that? Just trying to make sure that I'm not
Yeah, was
missing
just
anything.
making a comment that like when we share the slides, maybe we could have a slide where we share the three different buckets together, so it's easier for like a compare contrast sort of vibe. But yeah, we can share the slides afterwards for that. And I also really like Michelle's comment about how yeah, they celebrate Employee Appreciation Day every year, and that there's also a Slack shout out channel. So it kind of goes with what you're saying, Yannick, about frequency, like having something there all the time. It's easy to make it a little bit more frequent. Yeah.
Yeah, and like to quickly answer the bucket question, by bucket, I think you kind of mean those three things here, right?
Yeah, yeah, those ones.
Yeah. So I would say for that like they're pretty similar and they might vary depending on the organization. Some organization leader recognition is more impactful, other ones is peer recognition is more impactful. They kind of have similar ones, but one of the reasons why usage here might have higher numbers is because platform usage allows for different things. So it allows for frequency, it allows so everyone can see the recognition that happens in your organization. So it kind of combines, frequency and quality at the same time. So that's why you would see those numbers typically a bit higher for platform usage. So that's kind of one. Yeah. But you don't want to make sure because it might differ a little bit from companies to companies, right? So I wouldn't say one is better than others based on the data that I collected, over time. What I've seen is sometimes leader recognition is more powerful than peer for some organization, and other times peer is more powerful. So yeah. So don't like take a certain margin of error, like 4 or 5% here, just to make sure that we don't put them into too much, compare them too much, if that makes sense. But they're all like really important.
Amazing. We do have a few more questions, Yannick, but I feel like a good flow would be because I know you have some other example points to share about the quality, and then we can talk about the questions after the quality to give some context, I guess, to the conversation.
Yeah, sure. I'll drive into that and then we can jump. There's a really good question. We can jump
Yeah,
to
some
some.
really great
Perfect.
questions.
Yeah. And yeah, we can leave more time. I can drive through that. So now in terms of quality, kind of the same numbers as before, same thing. So I look at people who get recognized, that the recognition they're getting. So people kind of reported how like on those four questions, like how often, not how often, my bad, but is the recognition that you're getting authentic? Is it timely, personalized? And I kind of average, all of these scores, I graded them together. And people who were in the low quality group or people who mentioned that the recognition disagreed that the recognition they were getting was of good quality. Whereas the high quality group, they agreed with it. The recognition I'm getting, I agree that is of good quality. And then you compare the outcomes of those two groups. So in the low quality recognition group, 54% of them, mentioned or reported that they were engaged. Whereas 81% of them mentioned that they were engaged in the high quality recognition group. And and then if you go for satisfaction, it jumps from 49 to 91%, and then for likelihood to stay from 45 to 81%, at 36 point and 42 points for satisfaction likely to stay, which is pretty great, pretty big. And you see that like quality and the recognition that you're giving has a huge impact, right? Not only frequency here. And in this specific context, it's frequencies. Some of them is low and the others is high, right? So it's not controlled for that at the moment here. But quality has a huge impact. That's kind of what's like the main point here. And if you're interested in all of the different kind of elements here that I've shared, I also have the numbers for all of that, but they're pretty like consistent. I think the biggest one typically is authentic and fairness, which have the bigger boost, but they're all kind of equally similar and important in terms of quality matters a lot. As well. So the first step, you want to build that frequency, and then once frequency is there, ensure that the quality is there as well. And then some more things about I think more statistics. Like I said, frequency matters, but the quality kind of multiplies it. So I kind of had an example here of kind of what happens when you kind of look at people who get rarely recognized. So people get recognized yearly or less, but also the quality, the recognition that you're getting is low quality. So that's the worst thing, no recognition and really low recognition. And once you get recognized, it's bad quality. You see how low those numbers are. Only 53% of those people were engaged. Only 45% of those individuals were satisfied, and only 41% of those individuals were likely to stay. And then you simply remove the quality component. So you add back the people that that are of high quality, and so you have the people who receive low quality and people receive high quality, but they get recognized often, right? Then that number jumps to 72% for engagement, 82% to satisfaction, and 76% for likely to stay. And then if you have the best kind of combination, which is you receive frequent recognition with high quality recognition, that's when you see the biggest impact with 84%, engaged people in that group that are engaged, 93% are satisfied, and 81% of them are likely to stay in your organization. So you can see how important those two things are and kind of how they work together, which I think is pretty cool. And then okay, what kind of makes it happen? Here I say the platform makes it happen because that's how we measured it in the data for my specific example. But that's really your recognition program. Your recognition program will allow, so having that structure in place, allowing people to have somewhere to go to recognize people, having different features that allow you to recognize better, that also uses AI and different thing to automate things. You get recognized on your birthday, you receive an award for doing something specific. A lot of feature that can happen in recognition platforms have a huge impact on the quality of recognition that you get. So if you look at people who don't use the platform a lot, that's the quality that they report, right? So people who use the platform less than monthly or just yearly or less, 55% of them said that they agree that the recognition they're getting is authentic. Only 29% of them report that it's fair. And only 58% reported it's timely enough, and only 40% report that it's personalized. So participating in the recognition program is important, right? Because you see how it increased by a lot if you look active users. 90% of them say that the recognition they're getting is authentic. 70% say that it's fair. 87% of them said it's timely, and 80% say it's personalized. So the increase of that is just massive. So that's really important. I think a big takeaway here, participation in the recognition program and having, building a culture where employees recognize and participate in the recognition process is one of the most important things to boost the quality and lead to those amazing outcomes here with high and frequent quality recognition. think I have more here. Yeah, we have
Perfect.
questions here.
Yeah, let's go back
I think
and
we have a lot, right?
yeah, since we're talking about quality, let's go back and address some of these comments in the chat. I was trying to pick an order that it would kind of build on each other. So I feel like a good one to start with is Lissa's. So Lissa's asking, what do you recommend to get employee feedback on preferences to receive recognition? They have employees from Colombia, Mexico, India, Argentina, Ukraine, and the USA. And so and people were mentioning in the chat too, where it's definitely like culturally different from what people expect or want for recognition as well. And so Lissa's asking about individual survey options or how to ask people. From your opinions, I know you've done a lot of different surveys. What are some good questions to ask to really get the answers that you're looking for here?
Like to ask to measure recognition or to know what your employees want
Yeah,
or are
for
looking for.
preferences. For
Yeah, so
preferences.
preferences, like you don't want to overcomplicate things, but I would say like two things are important. The first thing is before you ask employees is ask yourself, let's say you're as an executive or things like that, you want to ask yourself a question, what culture you want to build, right? What are organizational values that are important and you want employees to actually do? And you want to kind of create guidelines and communicate to employees that you will, that we value these behaviors. And if you do those behaviors, then we'll recognize for. So that's the first step. So employees are aware of what's going on and what they can actually do to build that culture, right? And most employees will be happy to participate in that as well. If they love or they value as well the kind of company values. And then to answer your question, what question to ask to get the best feedback? Yeah, simply ask so you can ask already, like, do you believe that your recognition that you're getting, so do you believe that you're getting recognized enough? That would be one. Are you recognized enough? So or you can just ask how often you get recognized. That would be one. And you want it to be at least monthly or more. So if people don't get recognized enough, then okay, if it's not at least monthly or more, and most of employees are not getting recognized that much, then you want to find a way to increase that. And then you want to ask, is it personalized enough, the recognition that you're getting? And then if they say no, or they disagree with that, ask them, how would you like to be recognized? And you can have open-ended text questions. You can either ask that in a survey, it could be asked, in a huddle, it could be asked in one-on-one meetings, whatever, works for the style or preferences
Mhm. I've also seen companies do like an intake form during onboarding where the
as well.
managers
Yeah.
can ask the questions like, like how you want to be recognized. And then specifically there's stuff like this or that section where it's like, oh, do you prefer public or do you prefer private? Do you prefer written or do you prefer verbal? Just because some people they might be like taken aback in the moment and need some time to process. And so having it come through as like an email or a Slack message might be better for them. See if they prefer group ones or like one-on-one. I've also seen ones where they'll ask specific questions like, oh, if you're having like what's a good pick me up that you like? So if like a manager knows like, oh, she really likes a donut, she really likes a coffee. So if they really want to just like say thank you that day and just show up with like a treat that they know for sure that they'll like. I'm trying to think what other questions were there.
No,
I
I
know
think,
that with our team, we also made a like a little worksheet like this too, so that we could fill it in and share with our manager so that she knows when she wants to like surprise us. It's like we're still surprised by the recognition, but we know it's something that she's confident that it's something that we actually want to receive. There's nothing worse than like, oh, Becca, here's like a donut, but like a peanut butter
yeah.
donut, but I'm allergic to peanuts, right? So it's like there's nothing worse than give like meaning well, but it's not landing properly. So cool. Oh,
Yeah,
Lisa
yeah,
says here. Oh, sorry, Yannick, go ahead first, and I'll read the comment
yeah,
later.
and there's just that there's yes aspect of reward as well. It's important. Like we didn't really focus on that today in terms of the numbers, uh, but but in terms of personalization, the reward you're giving for the recognition often is important. That's why like asking is a good thing. But let's say you take like at Bucketlist, we give points for this kind of things, and then employees can basically buy what they're looking for, what they want. So it kinds of that adds also a personalization to it as well, because with the recognition they're getting, then they can kind of get what they prefer, what they want. We had people that got iPads, other that got experiences. If you like gift cards that you want, you can also get that. You have access to a lot of different things.
Oh, I love that. And
Yeah.
Lissa says, yeah, try to take note of employee gift preferences. Good idea to do during intaking. That is very thoughtful of you, Lissa, like noting down
Yeah.
the employee gift
It's
ideas.
really
And then
good.
yeah,
Yeah.
later when you're actually doing the gifting, they'll be like, wow, you remembered what I said to you that one time. And it just feels so meaningful to like when someone's listening to you about what you like, what you're like, yeah, what you're wanting next. That's awesome. And then Claudia says, I think this is another onboarding one, so it makes sense to share that here. During onboarding and milestone emails, I ask employees how they would prefer recognition. So in-office managers approaching the employee to be given the milestone, allowed to take them out for lunch, et cetera, et cetera. And so yeah, that's I love that. Just straight up asking what they want.
Amazing.
Like,
Yeah.
yeah, knowing as a company what types of things you can offer and how people prefer to like play in those options is really cool. Any other questions in here, Yannick, that you wanted to touch upon now, or let's see what else I
Yeah,
have.
I mean, we can move maybe question people like we said, like the little things that they did. Did they notice a change in, the employee behavior or performance or things like that after they started recognizing?
Cool. And then there's questions around, yeah, I'm sorry, I'm just gonna say this to you, Yannick, so you can like let me know your preference. But there's questions around um people who are wanting to just be like left alone and do their jobs, like no news is good news sort of thing. How do we recognize people who are, I guess, wanting different levels of recognition? I think you touched upon the idea of like fairness and standardization and rubrics for how you get recognized at a company. Is there anything else you want to add to that discussion there?
Maybe just like, some employees, don't like the visibility as much. But as long as it's not too intrusive, right? I think it's fine. But oftentimes, even if you say that you don't like to get recognized much and things like that, just someone letting you know, could be one-on-one, telling you know, I really appreciate the work that you did, definitely means a lot. And I don't think anyone ever complains saying, "Oh, I felt so bad today. Someone said to me that I did a good job," right? Like, so, so I think like it's recognizing all across the board. There's differences in how you can recognize, but everyone kind of needs it at the base of it. It's like a bit like drinking water, right? We all kind of, I don't like the taste of water. It tastes like nothing, perhaps, but we all need it in some way or form, right? I mean, I love water, so I kind of like the taste though. So that's why we're all different.
Amazing. All right, I think we have about 5 minutes left in the session before we need to start wrapping up. Yannick, I know that we had a couple of other points that we might wanted to touch base on. What do you think is the best thing to cover for this conversation?
Can you repeat that? I was just looking at something else. Sorry.
Oh yeah, no worries. I was just saying we have about 5 more minutes before we gotta start wrapping up. So I know there's a few other topics we want to touch upon today,
Yeah, a
but I'll
few
let
other
you pick your
slides.
favorite one to land on.
I can just like keep going with a little few things I have, but
Sure. Yeah, go
some
for
of the
it.
key trends. Knowing, is your recognition culture healthy at the end of the day? What are kind of the key trends from top workplaces, and question that you can ask yourself, just to know, like, are we doing things right in different ways? So is recognition regular or frequent? Like we talk about it, the impact of frequency is huge. So, you know, that's the trend. That's the trend 2026. Monthly or more recognition is the threshold where outcomes meaningfully improve. So aim for that. Aim for getting most of your employees at least to get that monthly recognition. Because if you can achieve that, that's going to lead to great, great, great results on your culture. Then it's all the quality components. So is it meaningful? Is it visible? Is it timely? Is it authentic, personalized, and all these things? The new trends is that, quality is important. So if you recognize effectively, you're gonna get a result across the board. And then and one of a big important one is it tied to organizational value. You're trying to build a culture here, recognition as well, right? So you want to make sure, like I said multiple times in this talk, that you want to recognize and reinforce behaviors that embodies your cultures, and because that's really important as well, and that will allow you to attract employees that fit for your control culture as well over time, especially doing interviews and things like that. If you mention these things in some ways or form, you'll attract talent that see the same way as you do. And is it embedded into operations as well? And I didn't talk a lot about it, but there's like AI that's emerging and things like that. But recognition in the age of AI is also important. You can significantly increase the frequency if you didn't rank for some different things. So you can specifically set some different like work expectation and automatically recognize people if they achieve it, right? So there's kind of things like that that can be AI powered as well and automated and things like that. So culture, so recognition and AI are kind of fitting together as well. You can boost the quality and recognition as well of by using artificial intelligence and automation. And then, want to see where you fit in the maturity spectrum here. You want to be at embedded. So you want high quality, frequent recognition that's built into your daily operation. So I'll kind of move quickly. I can skip that slide here. It's kind of going back to like the early warning sign of a culture decline in terms of recognition. Quickly, like if you see recognition going down, if you measure these things, I think you should like track it, measure recognition participation, things like that. If you see a decline in recognition frequency, in recognition quality, in fairness perception, or let's say you use a recognition platform, you have like people participate in the platform less and less. These are things that's going to negatively impact your culture in the long term. So these kind of early signs that you can watch for. And finally, kind of a quick ROI. I know a lot of people ask about that. There is going to be a talk about it later as well. So I'm just going to have that quick slide here. But let's take the numbers that we had. If you take like really low recognition and low quality recognition, you have about like 41% of these people that say that they're likely to stay. And if you boost that, if you increase that to high quality and frequent, that brings you to 81%. So as a retention impact, that's a 40 percentage point increases, right? So for a 500 people company, that would be 200 people that are more likely to stay in your organization. And if only 10% of those decide to leave, which is like kind of a conservative approach to see, that would make 20 of them will leave the organization. And a good like conservative way to calculate it, let's say you assume an average of 70K salary, and it's a 6 to 9 months of salary. If you lose an employee, then the cost for only losing those 20 people would be around 1.1 million. Could be a lot more, could be a bit less as well, but it would range from 700,000 to like 4 or 5 million if you have to replace some really, really high qualified individuals as well that have like higher salaries. So kind of a quick here about ROI and the impact it has. So not only it impacts, engagement, satisfaction, and things like that, and turnover, but the price of it is great. And finally, some strategic next step. I think participation in implementing a recognition program is crucial. Invest in high quality training, ensure that it's high quality, visibility and fairness is there, and measure these things as well, right? So measure leading indicators, measure frequency, quality, and measure the impact it has also on different things in your organization to see how effective it is. And that's kind of all I have today. I think we have a few more minutes to actually answer more questions.